There is a moment, maybe 3 or 4 times every day, when you are holding something in your hand that will become the substance of your body within hours. A piece of bread, a bowl of soup, a glass of water, a plate of whatever is in front of you tonight. And in that small, ordinary moment, almost nobody in the modern world understands what is actually happening. You think you are eating. You are not only eating, you are receiving instruction into every cell of your body about what that food is going to do inside of you once it crosses the threshold of your mouth. And if you say nothing over it, or if you say the wrong thing, or if you say it without attention, the food still feeds you, but it does not heal you. It does not protect you. It does not carry into your body the layer of bracha, of blessing, that our sages understood to be the difference between food that sustains a person and food that builds a person into the kind of vessel that sickness cannot easily enter. My name is Rabbi Naomi. I have spent more than 30 years inside the texts of our tradition. The Talmud, the teachings of the Rambam, who was not only one of our greatest sages, but a physician to kings. The writings of the Baal Shem Tov, and the small handwritten prayer book my grandmother carried with her out of a life that tried very hard to end her. My grandmother lived to 96 years old. She buried 2 husbands, 3 siblings, and more friends than I could count. And she never spent a night of her life in a hospital until the last one. She ate simply. She ate less than most people I know eat today. But every single thing that entered her mouth, every piece of bread, every sip of tea, every spoonful of soup, was crossed first by the specific words I am going to teach you tonight. She used to tell me, Neomile, the food does not know what to do in your body until you tell it. And for most of my younger life, I thought that was the sweet superstition of an old woman from another world. I was wrong. What she was describing was the ancient science of bracha al ha'ochel, the blessing over food, preserved in our tradition for more than 3,000 years and understood by our sages as one of the most direct spiritual technologies a human being has for the repair and protection of their own body. I am going to give you the exact words tonight, but you must stay with me until the final minute of this teaching, because the words alone are not enough. There are 3 elements: the words, the posture, and the kavana, the intention. And if you miss even one of them, the blessing is incomplete and the healing layer does not enter the food. Before we go further, do one thing with me right now. Type the word refu'ah in the comments below. Refu'ah is the Hebrew word for healing. Declare it publicly, because when you name healing out loud, in front of this community that is watching with you, you begin the first movement of the blessing itself. Now I need you to hear why almost everything you have been told about your health has been working you in circles. You have tried the diet, maybe 3 diets, maybe 5. You have taken the supplements that someone on the internet said would change your life. You have counted the macros, the calories, the steps, the hours of sleep. You have stood in the aisle of the health food store, reading labels for 20 minutes at a time. And perhaps some of this has helped in small ways, and perhaps some of it has not helped at all. And perhaps a part of you is quietly exhausted from the sheer weight of all the instructions the modern world has layered on top of the simple act of putting food in your mouth. None of this is evil. None of it is even wrong, exactly. It is incomplete. It is working on only one layer, the physical layer. And in the tradition of our sages, every physical act has a spiritual layer sitting directly on top of it, and whichever layer carries the greater intention is the layer that shapes what happens next. Imagine a letter that has been sealed inside an envelope. The food you are about to eat is the envelope. Inside that envelope is a letter, the instruction for what that food is going to do once it is inside you. If you say nothing, the envelope is delivered to your body with a blank letter inside. The body does what it can with blank instructions, which is to say, the body runs whatever default program the food itself is carrying, which, in the world we live in today, is often a program of stress, of processing, of residue, of subtle inflammation. If you say the correct words, with the correct intention, in the correct posture, you are writing the letter before the envelope is opened. You are telling the food what to become inside you. The Rambam, 800 years ago, wrote openly that the blessing spoken over food changes the spiritual composition of that food, and that this change expresses itself as a change in the way the body responds to the food, not instantly, not dramatically, but across weeks, across months, across years, in the quiet accumulation that is the only thing that actually determines a human life. Let me tell you what I watched with my own eyes, because if I do not tell you this story, you will take what I am teaching tonight and treat it as metaphor, and it is not metaphor. A man came to see me a little over 3 years ago. He was 57 years old. He was a builder by trade, strong arms, hard life, the kind of man who had never once in his adult years been to a doctor for a preventive appointment. But he had gone that year because his wife had insisted, and the doctor had found 3 separate markers that all pointed in a bad direction. His blood pressure, a number in his blood work that I will not name precisely because I am not his physician, and a shadow on a scan that was not yet serious, but was not yet nothing. He sat in my study, and he told me he was not afraid for himself. He was afraid because he had 2 daughters who were not yet married, and he wanted very much to dance at their weddings. I did not give him a medical plan, because I am not a doctor, and I told him so directly. I told him to continue every single thing his physician had prescribed. But I also told him I would teach him what my grandmother had taught my mother, and what my mother had taught me. The exact blessing over food, spoken the exact way, 3 times a day, without missing 1 meal for 90 consecutive days. He agreed. The first 2 weeks, nothing visible changed. In the 3rd week, he came back to tell me he was actually eating less than he had been eating before. Not because he was forcing himself, but because the food felt more complete to him somehow, and the urge to keep eating after his body had enough had started to quiet. By the 6th week, he told me that the quality of his sleep had shifted. He was not sure if it was the blessing or the meals themselves, or simply the attention he was now paying to his own life, and I told him that the sages would say that distinction does not matter, because the 3 are one movement. In the 9th week, he had his follow-up appointment. The blood pressure had moved into a range his doctor said he had not expected to see without medication changes. The blood number had also moved, significantly enough that the doctor asked him what he had changed. He told the doctor the truth, and the doctor, he said, had simply looked at him and nodded and said, "Keep doing whatever you were doing." The shadow on the scan took longer. That was not the 90 days. That was closer to 8 months of continued blessing, continued attention, continued everything his physician had asked of him. But the follow-up scan that he eventually had showed that shadow had not grown, and the doctor had used the word stable, which was the first time anyone had used that word about his body in over a year. I'm not telling you this story to promise you a medical outcome. I'm telling you this story because this is what I have watched happen, not once, not twice, but across 30 years of practice, when a person takes the bracha over their food seriously, and does it for long enough to let the accumulation do its work. What that story teaches is older than any modern nutritional science, and the sages laid it out very clearly. Your body is not only a biological machine. Your body is what the Zohar calls a dira batachtonim, a dwelling place in the lower world, and every structure of the spiritual body above sits on top of the physical body below, like a shirt sits on top of skin. When you speak a blessing over food, you are not performing a ritual for tradition's sake. You are doing 3 specific things. First, you are elevating the food, what the sages call birur, separating the holy spark inside it from the outer shell that obscures it, so that what enters your body is the food plus its highest layer, rather than the food plus its lowest layer. Second, you are changing your own physiological state in the exact seconds before the food enters your mouth. And modern science, only in the last few decades, has begun to document that the state of a person's nervous system in the moments before eating dramatically shapes how that food is digested, how much of its nutrition is actually absorbed, and how much inflammation it produces in the process. Every blessing, properly spoken, drops the nervous system out of the posture of urgency and into the posture of reception. Third, you are placing what the sages call a kav, a line, a channel, between the food on your plate and the source of all nourishment above. When that line is present, the food feeds you on two layers simultaneously, the physical layer of its nutrients and the spiritual layer of its bracha. When the line is absent, the food feeds only on one layer. And across a year, across 10 years, across the length of a human life, this is not a small difference. This is the difference between a body that quietly builds itself into a vessel of endurance and a body that quietly wears itself down despite every best effort. Now listen carefully, because the precision here is the entire practice. I am going to walk you through each element. The posture comes first. Before the words, before anything, you are about to eat. The food is in front of you. You do not lean over the plate. You do not hold your phone in your other hand. You do not continue the conversation you were having. You sit back from the food by the space of a hand. You place both of your hands flat on the table on either side of the plate, palms down, fingers relaxed. You take one breath in through your nose and one breath out through your mouth. And in that one exhale, you are releasing everything you carried into the meal from the part of the day that came before it. Then you look at the food. Actually look at it, not for a second, for the length of a full second breath. You are acknowledging that what is in front of you came through the earth, through the hands of many people you will never meet, through a chain of provision that stretches back to the very beginning of the world. The words come next. There is a core blessing that our tradition speaks in its original form, and there is the meaning that sits inside the words. And I am going to give you both. The Hebrew words are these: Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro. This is what is called in our tradition the bracha of Shehakol, the blessing of through whose word all things come into being. It is the most universal of the food blessings. It can be spoken over almost any food or drink, and if you learn only one blessing in your life, this is the one. Blessed are you, the Eternal, our God, Sovereign of the universe, through whose word all things come into being. Now hear me carefully, because this is the part most people miss. If you cannot yet pronounce the Hebrew, or if you are not from the Jewish tradition and you want to honor the spirit of this teaching while speaking in your own language, the words carry their weight when you speak them with full intention in the language you actually think in. What matters far more than the language is the kavana, the intention, which is the third element. The kavana is this: in the second you say the blessing, you must hold 3 specific intentions simultaneously. The first intention is gratitude. Not the abstract gratitude of a polite thank you, but the specific gratitude of a person who understands that this food did not have to arrive. The second intention is connection. You are declaring, out loud, that this food comes from a source beyond the market and the shop and the kitchen, and that you are consciously opening a channel from that source into your own body in this moment. The third intention, and this is the one almost no one teaches, is instruction. You are instructing this food. You are speaking into it the purpose you are eating it for. Let this food become strength in my body. Let this food become clarity in my mind. Let this food become healing in the places that need healing. Let nothing in this food turn against me. You do not have to say these exact words out loud. You hold them in the inside of your mind, in the single second of the blessing. That is the letter inside the envelope. That is the instruction you are writing before the food enters you. There are two additional elements, and they are the ones that separate a casual blessing from a complete one. The first additional element is the pause. After you say the words, you do not pick up your fork immediately. You wait the length of 2 breaths only. In that small pause, the spiritual impression of the blessing settles into the food. If you rush from the words into the first bite, you have said the blessing, but you have not let it take hold. 2 breaths, no longer than that. The second additional element is the closing. When you are finished eating, not before the last bite but after, you speak a closing word of gratitude. It can be as simple as the one word, Baruch, blessed, spoken quietly, or the fuller phrase, Baruch Hazan et Hakol, blessed is the one who feeds all. What this closing does is seal the channel you opened when you began. Without the closing, the channel you opened stays open loosely, and the spiritual impact of the meal begins to leak out in the hours after eating. With the closing, the blessing of that meal continues to operate inside your body until the next meal arrives. Here is what you do today. Not in a week. Not after you have studied this more. Today, at the very next thing you eat or drink, before the first bite or the first sip. You sit back, you place your hands flat, you take 1 breath, you look at the food, you speak the blessing in whatever language is honest for you. You hold the 3 intentions for the full second. You wait 2 breaths, and then you eat. At the end, you say the closing word. You do this at every meal, every snack, every drink that is not plain water. You do not skip one. You do this for 30 consecutive days as the beginning, and then you continue it for the rest of your life as the practice of a person who understands what eating actually is. What you are looking for in the first weeks is not a dramatic healing event. You are looking for small signs of movement. You will notice you are eating slightly less and feeling slightly more satisfied. You will notice your sleep improving by small increments. You will notice a quieter mind in the hour after a meal where before there was heaviness or fog. You may notice, if you have a chronic pattern that has been with you for years, that it begins to soften at the edges before it begins to shift at the center. These are the first fruits. Mark them. Do not dismiss them. What I have given you tonight is one blessing within a complete architecture of the tradition of refuah, healing, that my grandmother carried and my mother taught me, and that I have spent 30 years studying in the texts. It is a real piece, and if you apply it exactly as I have just described, you will feel the shift within weeks. But I want to be honest with you about what one blessing can and cannot do on its own. The full architecture contains the specific blessing for water, the specific blessing for bread that is different from the blessing over other foods, the 3 morning words that set the body for the entire day before the first meal is eaten, the specific psalms traditionally whispered over someone who is unwell, and the precise sequence of blessings for the days of the week in which the body is most open to repair. I have gathered all of this into one resource, with the original Hebrew, the transliteration, the translation, the kavana for each one, and the commentary of the sages that teaches the mechanism behind it. It is not a collection of prayers. It is the operating instructions for a body treated the way our tradition has always said a body should be treated. If you are serious about building the kind of health that does not depend on the panic of a diagnosis to take seriously, then you will not wait for a diagnosis to be the thing that finally moves you. You will move now, while the clarity of this teaching is still awake in you. The link is in the description below. Everything is there. Now hear me, because this next part is what most people are not warned about and what undoes most beginners. In the first 7 to 10 days of this practice, something is going to happen that will feel like the opposite of what you were hoping for. You will have a day when you feel worse, not better. You will have a meal where the food itself tastes strange in a way it did not taste before. You will have a moment of unusual tiredness in the middle of the afternoon, or an emotion that surfaces without warning while you are holding a piece of bread in your hand. I want you to understand exactly what this is, because if you do not understand, you will stop the practice, and you will tell yourself it was not working. What you are experiencing is what the sages called the birur, the separation. When you begin to eat with full intention, the body begins to release layers of residue that have been sitting in it for years. Not only physical residue, but emotional residue, tension, old grief, old fear that your body carried into meals long ago and never had the chance to release. For a handful of days, those old layers rise to the surface before they leave. This is not the failure of the practice. This is the practice working at a depth you were not prepared for. Stay with it. Do not speak sickness over your own body in those days. Do not cancel your own healing with your own mouth. Continue the blessing. The passage tends to finish within 3 to 5 days of when it began, and what tends to follow it in the people I have watched walk through it is a quality of calm in the body that most of them have not felt since they were children. One final thing before I let you go. What I have placed in your hands tonight is sacred. Our grandmothers whispered it over small bowls of soup in kitchens that no longer exist, in lives that were not supposed to produce the people who are still here today because of what they carried. You are now a keeper of this. Tell me in the comments right now what the very next thing you are going to eat or drink today will be, and declare that you will speak the blessing over it before you take the first bite. I read every comment. I keep the names of the ones who take action, and I hold them in the prayer I speak over my own first food of each morning. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now and turn on the notification bell. Next week, I am going to teach the specific morning words that set the body for the entire day before the first meal. The words my grandmother spoke every single morning between waking and her first cup of tea, without exception, for the last 60 years of her life. Based on what I know about the times we are living in, you cannot afford to miss it. And if anything I said today reached something real in you, press the like button before you leave. It tells the platform to carry this teaching to another soul, sitting somewhere tonight in front of a plate they were about to eat without thought, and maybe now they will eat it differently. May every piece of food that crosses your lips from this day forward carry the bracha that turns it into healing. May your body know the quiet strength that our grandmothers knew. May you live long enough and well enough to dance at every wedding that matters to you. Shalom, Chaverim. Shalom.